Welcome to the Filmmaker Mixer Podcast, the podcast by filmmakers for filmmakers.
This episode is sponsored by Gemini Crown Tech, software for all of your production needs. Stay tuned for more information later in the show. Hello, everybody. This is the Filmmaker Mixer Podcast, and today we are chatting with John Betancourt. John is a published writer and award-winning screenwriter. He loves stories from all genres, but is partial to science fiction and horror, two of his favorites. He also is the editor-in-chief at Nerds That Geek. So, John, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it, Jeff. This is an honor to be here.
Just to set the context of the conversation, give us the elevator pitch of Nerds That Geek.
It really is. We say it on our homepage. It's where we celebrate the stories you love. We love celebrating storytelling. It is just, the stories are so beautiful. They mean so much to all of us. And that's all we want to do all day, just talk about how much we love them and what they do for people and the reactions they evoke, plain and simple.
And storytelling is, it's an art form. It's something we use for entertainment, but it shapes our culture. It shapes our mythology. It shapes who we are as people. It shapes our, the morals that we're moored to sometimes. So I'm curious, as a lover of storytelling and a writer yourself, how did you get started? Were you always reading as a kid, or how did that happen?
Actually, yeah, I think really I have my mother and my father to thank. My mother had a book in front of me pretty much when I was about 2 or 3 years old, if I remember right. I'm getting up there in years, so the memory's a little fuzzy, but I do know I had a book in my hand for a very young age. And
Catcher in the Rye, I'm guessing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course, all that stuff. But actually, ironically, I was reading Stephen King when I was like in the 5th grade. So that's
no kidding. Interesting.
I love reading. I was consuming books left and right. Creativity was there. And then my dad shows me Star Trek, and it's all kind of uphill from there, so to speak. So it really was a very early age, just being immersed in stories and just learning to love them.
What was that first book? Do you remember?
I don't, honestly. That's too far back now. 20 years ago, John could have answered that. 45-year-old John can no longer remember. He just knows that he was reading a lot of books. That's for sure.
Well, how did you start your website?
So that was born out of, honestly, a desire to stop seeing so much negativity. My biggest personal issue with the web and web writing is there's so much out there that's just so toxic. People constantly bashing on franchises and just, giant op-eds about how much they hate Captain America. And it just is not indicative, I think, of what people actually want out there. I don't think the average person sits there and really just hate watches. I think people do. I mean, that's any genre or anything that you do. I'm from Denver. I'm a Broncos fan. So, watching the Super Bowl is a very difficult venture. But at the same time, I'm not going online, and shouting all sorts of horrible things about the Chiefs, other than, who beats them. But besides that point, it's really a matter of just we got tired of that. We really wanted to start seeing something more positive and really just exactly that, celebrate stories. I think people really want to cherish the wonder of what they saw and keep talking about it for days on end. And we want to welcome that environment.
Well, I'm curious about something. We've been covering a lot of film festivals, and I know you do the same thing. You do a lot of movie reviews. When you're covering a specific festival, how do you choose, and this is really a question, I guess, for the filmmakers out there who are listening, how do you choose what you want to cover and why? What rises to the top for you? Or do you have a process for that? Or is it just what you like? I mean, I'm curious.
Well, I mean, truth be told, I think there was a time when I would have been more selective, maybe a little more pickier of, sticking to a certain genre or that type of thing. But as time has gone on, I've seen some really beautiful pieces of work, be it from television or be it from film, where you just straight up say yes. I think I try to cover as much as I can. That may not be the wisest course of action at all times, because sometimes you get a lot of requests and it kind of bogs you down, and that's just time management, I think. And there's that. As a human being, you get a little overwhelmed sometimes. You're like, wow, that's a lot of stuff that I got to do. But at the same time, it's really an opportunity for a filmmaker and for a television writer and television creator. This is a big deal for them. These festivals are not just a chance to get it out and try to make people as possible. They want feedback. They want people to know what they've created here and the meaning that went into it. So I tend to say yes to everything, and I tend to organize it. Is really the big key. I go through what I have, what I need to go see in person, what I can get a screener for. Screeners are, I think, a lifesaver, truthfully, right, because you can see it in advance and you can ponder on it and really kind of get a good feel for it. Maybe watch it again, at the festival. But either way, trying to get as much done as you can before you get to the festival is kind of my key. Then you're not overwhelmed. I mean, at first, when you see the list of people that want to talk about it and want to share their movies, that's what's overwhelming. But once you get into it, really plan accordingly. It's a much better process, and you really get a chance to kind of go through. But I love every genre out there. I mean, you'd be surprised what you find sometimes. I've seen some really powerful romantic films that take some really unique risks and take some ideas. Some stuff right after COVID was very much like that. And I mean, the stuff that I saw at Austin last year was just amazing to say the least.
And when you're consuming, all this content and you're thinking about it, you're writing about it, um, what do you do outside of that world so you don't get burned out on on projects? Because
Oh yeah.
it's easy to get a little overwhelmed.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like I said, there are times, and there's some days, you don't. All you can do is go, go, go. Especially at the festivals, because there's some days, you were there at Austin last year. You
Yeah,
guys had a taste of that too. There's just so much that comes at you at once.
yeah,
For me, it's a matter of this one I say, but I don't practice as well as I should, but definitely get some adequate rest. Sleep heals all things. Naps are the most healing agent ever. I try to get as much of that as I can, but some days, you know how it goes. But really, just getting in front of something that is enjoyable. Still, there are comfort movies that I can put on. That just are just great movies that I love all the time, anyways, and just are a nostalgia escape or just a great escape in general. For me personally, video games are kind of my escape point because then I can just get away from everything and just kind of get lost in a little video game adventure.
right.
And just kind of clear my head. I find that to be very helpful. But you got to find something specific that obviously caters to you, the writer, that helps you clear your head, and you need to make use of that as much as you can.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So what kinds of things do you like to write in the in
Well,
the narrative and fiction world?
yeah, it's been a while that I've had a chance to do that, but I've been picking at a horror story. It's one of my genres that has meant a lot to me throughout the years. You're getting ready to reading Stephen King at 5 or in 5th grade. You're finding some of that stuff to be pretty enticing early on. So I've been picking at a horror film. There's some other stories that I'm kind of trying to decide what to do with. They've been around for a while, and I think as time marches on, and you march on, the story you thought that you were writing versus the person that you are now no longer mesh.
Right.
The messaging changes in your mind. So there's some stuff that I'm kind of tinkering with there. Some scripts that I want to go back and revisit and maybe update a little bit. But for the most part, really any genre. I've actually written I've actually done some religious films on for some local producers out here in Denver. Didn't really go anywhere, but hey, the experience is there, and it's a chance to write movies.
Sure.
I think what the thing is just I just love to write. So if there's a genre that calls to me, or as long as there's something in the story that calls to me,
Right.
I could do it. I can do it, no problem.
So are you a character person first or a plot person first? Because I know screenwriters sometimes have their way into a
Yeah,
story.
it's such an interesting process because I know a few screenwriters across the way, and I've heard there's the folks that do use the index card wall, and they
Right.
have all that out there, and there's others do things. I am actually an outline writer. I very much like to have just a great understanding where the story is going to begin with. So I'll block out the whole thing, just the basic hits past that point, and then I'll go back in and kind of fill in the blanks before I really sit down to write. So really, the outline first, really with just the high concept of the story is what I want to touch upon. I tend to write the endings first, just so I know where it's going and have an idea what it's about, and then we can kind of filter and start looking at, well, how do we get to that point? How does a character go from here to here? So that they can find what they're looking for at the ending. So I tend to kind of maybe work in reverse is probably a better way to put that too.
So as someone who's doing outlines, are you like a beat sheet person, or do you just start with the three acts and break them down? Do you have a process, or is it different for every
Um,
script?
I'm very big on the 3 act process. That's very important to me. It's something that I always speak to, and even just looking at even doing reviews. What's the 3 acts look like in the film that I'm reviewing, or the TV show that out of the 5 acts that I'm 5 or 6 acts that I'm reviewing for a TV show. Just to understand the structure of it, I love that stuff. That really gets my creative juices going when you look at the structure. So I would say what I tend to look at first is what I want the story to accomplish. Ideally, what's the story trying to get across? What am I
Right.
trying to get done with this? Is it really? And there's no wrong answer there. I mean, if it's a brainless scare piece, then it's a brainless scare piece. If I want to talk about consumerism, then is that what's conducive? What's kind of in my mind? And then we start really looking at the 3 act structure pretty heavily there. So what is the setup? What is that complication? What is that resolution? And then I can really kind of pitter out what the character's motivations are, who they are, what they're about, and you can kind of start really kind of toying with that finite stuff, that really good stuff where certain pieces of dialogue hit a little better, all that good stuff.
Well, switching back to film festivals and filmmaking,
Hmm?
as someone who covers a lot of festivals, any tips for filmmakers on how to rise above the noise when they're trying to get their film screened or get their film noticed by someone like you to do a review? Because I know, like in our case, once the festival hits, we start getting a ton of emails.
Oh, sure.
And for better or worse, the emails that come in first get noticed because as that box gets filled and filled and filled, it's harder to find. You just lose track, and that's just a
Yeah.
simple little thing. But I'm curious, what would your top three, top five pointers be to filmmakers to try to get noticed when they're at a festival?
Oh, sure. I mean, one of the important things that I think a lot of folks don't put a lot of weight in right now still, and I say a lot of it just kind of as an in general thing that I see just in kind of starting out filmmakers and creativity. You got to have a social media presence of some kind. I'm not saying that you need to have 10,000 followers out the gate, but you should have a website for the page, a website for the film. Sorry, not the page. You should have some kind of social media presence for all of that. Just because that's stuff that can help lead in to the festival as well. You can, I mean, if you're looking at anybody that's going to the festival and is hashtagging these things and taking a look at it, there's a chance to see, that, this movie is going to be at Austin. This movie is going to be, at Sundance, and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's handy, is to have a social media presence. It's a little tough on some of the other things. I mean, ideally, the best case scenario for me is, really have an electronic press kit ready. So that all the materials are there for the writer, and it's great when I can go back and email and just pull the images that I need, pull all the information I need from the press kit as to who's who and character wise, if by chance I didn't get into notes somewhere. But that's not always easy, because again, that's budget and time, and I understand for independent filmmakers sometimes you don't have that. So I mean, if you can get it, great. And just past that particular point, it's tough because, like you said, same thing. I had my first wave of emails from Austin, and the second wave that came in, once we got there. And it's hard because, again, they're also traveling. They're also talking to multiple people, probably planning multiple festivals. I think the best thing they can do is follow up. It's okay to email more than once. I think sometimes that can seem a little daunting, just because it might not have gone through, or like you said, right to the bottom of the pile. But sometimes I get caught up too, and I'll get a reminder saying, "Hey, just out of curiosity, you still want interested in it?" "Oh, yes, I did want to talk to you." And that's really the best things that they can do. Because I mean, once you get to festival, it's festival. It's going to be what it's going to be. You're going to be hobnobbing and running around and doing interviews and that kind of stuff. But for filmmakers, yeah, I think if you have a social media presence, have a good kit ready, and just really make sure that you're adamant about making sure that the press does take a look at you. I think that's three key things you can do to kind of get noticed.
And I think you made a good point. You said, email a second or a third time, as long as you're kind and brief,
Oh yeah,
because I have had that happen where I've missed the first email or two, and then that third or fourth one comes through. I'm like, man, sounds like a great film. Why
right.
am I not looking at that? Um, I'm curious about something else.
Sure.
We get uh, queries about interviews and things like this. And sometimes it's just, hey, I got this film and, can we chat? And sometimes they'll actually outline, usually it comes from a publicist, but they'll actually outline points of what might be interesting to talk about in that film. Um, are you a fan of that? Do you like that when they give you sort of a guidepost?
I think so. I mean, I mean, I think that's what's intriguing about this particular industry for entertainment journalism. You get such a diverse, just a diverse look at how people present a film, and it kind of gives you an idea of what the filmmaker's thought process kind of is. And to me, it kind of helps me approach how to talk to them sometimes too, because that's someone that's very detail oriented and they want to go to that great length. And some, are just excited to share the project.
Right.
I think the key for me is more so exactly what you just said, in that, just be kind of professional. Not to say that I get a lot of emails where it's rude or it's nasty.
Right.
It's very, very, very rare. But I just think that's really, kindness is always the key to that, and professionalism is always the key to that. And I think that's why I'm able to be able to talk to so many folks on a regular basis, because that's normally what I get. Like, hey, it mean a lot for you to look at this film, and they mean that. I think that's what's really cool about festivals and cool about independent film and even just television in general, is there really is a pride in there. People really want to celebrate. Look what I did, and they did something big. You made a movie. That is not an easy task.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I find that intriguing. It just really kind of breaks down more so what you're going to be looking at.
Right.
And it's just how they present it. But I think there's no wrong way to do it.
Yeah, I'm becoming a fan of when they outline some talking points, because then whether I follow them or not, it gives me a good it just gives you an interesting idea of what might be interesting about the project beyond the storyline, so
Yeah.
how they made it, where they made it, just interesting things like that. And also with regards to the email, I think you're right. I'm not worried that people will send nasty emails. I guess my real point in asking that question was, don't think you're being overbearing. Don't be afraid and thinking you're pushing too hard by
Oh yeah.
sending a second or third
Fair
email,
point.
because it's easy for yeah, you don't want to come across the wrong way and people get worried about that. And I think, hey, just be persistent, nothing wrong with that. But
Well, I know it's kind of the old adage of it. I think it's something that even as a journalist you struggle with sometimes because you're also like, "You God, have I sent too many emails today? It was it's been long." I think it just comes down to the worst they're going to say is no, or maybe they're going
exactly.
to want it. I mean, if that Thursday is filled to the brim, because that person's filled up in interviews, well, then what about Friday or what a moment like now? I think the real beauty right now of entertainment journalism is that we can all do this.
Right.
Because I've done that a few times with Austin now in the last couple of years that I've covered it is do some interviews in advance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Watch the movie, you can do that early because if you get in early enough, you can do that. And I think that's what makes it so versatile now is that then be persistent because now there's just so many avenues of how we can talk,
Right.
and that's what's so beautiful about it.
It's actually quite fascinating. I am now at a point where I get more information, from podcasts and things like that, than broadcast. There's so because you can really, dig down into a specific niche and really dig into something, whether it be, genre films or film festivals or whatever. Um, but well, I'm also curious, do you see any new trends that you think are going to be coming down the pipeline soon in terms of studio pictures, indie film, any what do you see on the horizon?
I see a few things, both in entertainment journalism and in that. I think first what you said, there's a real thirst right now for something different.
Right,
Um,
right.
I've seen some things online where there's some um, I've seen some reviewers just get just dragged for their review because it may either be malicious or just people feel that it was wrong. And obviously that's not to say that that if the material doesn't resonate with you, say so. I mean that's always be honest in journalism in that particular respect. But there is a certain market that people want people to be more focused on the niche, be more focused on that, and we've kind of seen that rise now of this entertainment journalist hybrid. TikTok really kind of kicked that off, where you start seeing folks that they're not quite an influencer, but they are, and they're not what you could consider to be a traditional journalist, but they're talking about film and television, and they are in a way influencing. So it's kind of this incredible hybrid. I think we're going to start seeing more of that as time goes on, because that really is kind of a different perspective and a fresh voice. I think there will still be a debate as to whether or not that's legitimate or not, but I mean the internet goes where the internet goes, and if that's people are going to move to, that's people are
Yeah.
going to move to, and according to that. And I think we're going to see. I mean, I know there's a lot of doomsaying out there right now when it comes to the industry, and I don't know how qualified I am to speak upon those particular pieces because a lot of what I do is just really the story portion of it. But I do think we're going to see a rise in independent film again, if we aren't already seeing it kind of now, because
I
there
think you're
is.
right. I think you're right.
I mean, you look at the success of Sinners right now. I mean, that's one that there were some analysts are like, nah, it's going to just do okay, and it's just doing great at the box office right now. I'll be shocked if there's not going to be a re-release of IMAX later this year. But it's an independent film. When you think about it, it's not backed by one of the giant studios. And if I'm wrong on that, then obviously I apologize. But even still, it's just a great flick like that. But you're seeing original content. It is still on the rise. It's not perfect yet, but that thirst I think is going to continue to grow, and I think independent film is going to continue to grow, and streaming is helping with that too. I mean, a bunch of stuff that Austin that I covered in 23 is now available for purchase.
Right, right.
And I'm sure stuff we saw this year at Austin will be on streaming very soon, if not about 6 months from now.
Yeah, I saw some great films at Fantastic Fest and at Austin, um, South by. Some really interesting voices, and I was having a conversation. Who was it I was talking to? Having a conversation about that stretch in like the 90s, was it the 90s, I guess, all these new voices in independent film were coming up, and it always ebbs and flows a little bit. And
Oh, yeah.
I kind of miss having that choice. And yeah, I saw some great pictures, and like you said, a lot of them are now coming out and getting distribution, so that's fantastic. Um, what's new for you coming up? Anything you're working on? Any new stories? Or I know you said you're working on your horror film. Anything
Yeah, it's
you?
kind of the horror film's kind of my side piece when it
Yeah.
comes to just writing stuff, because I mean there's days where same thing, just got to clear your head. I've written 10 recaps in a row, and I'm just like, let me just get a little creativity going real quick and just palate cleanse my brain real fast. That's always going on for that. Really, yeah, I think really for me from a creative standpoint, I think I just need to decide to decide what I want to do with all that stuff. I think I've been picking at it too long.
Yeah.
It's kind of like will he or won't he moments for myself. Because I mean, I do enjoy creative writing in general. It's a blast. It really is. It's so much fun to just sit there and see worlds come to life on the page.
Yeah.
As for what's coming from Nerds of Geek, stuff that I can talk about, because there's obviously some things that I cannot, but I will say for a fact that, obviously Series Fest is in town in Denver this week, which is recording on the 29th of April. So that's here. That's always a good time to see. That's a TV festival. I think really the only major TV festival in the nation. I've not seen any others, but pilots galore coming up. There's some new folks, again, speaking of fresh voices, this is a great place to go for that, because they have independent pilots just all over the place. And it's a good mix of, there's going to be a screening of the 4 seasons from Netflix this week, but also, I'm going on Friday night to a horror trivia show screening.
Oh, nice.
So it's that kind of stuff, but it's a great blast. And then obviously, we'll be continuing to do the usual network covers that we always do at Nerds of Geek. So
awesome. Well, before we wrap up, how can filmmakers track you down? I know you got the website and all the information's up there, but just plug it one more time for those filmmakers heading to festivals that want to get some coverage.
Hey, shameless plug is always a good shameless plug, that's for sure. Especially now. There was a time when it wasn't, but now in this era of, everybody popping up in new journalism roles, absolutely plug yourself. You can find us at Nerds That Geek, NERDSTHATGEEK. And then obviously at John E. Betancourt. That's my general handle there for everything on Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff. And yes, nerdsthatgeek.com. All of our information is there for our staff and our contact info. And we are always happy to chat and always happy to talk about projects because, there's so many beautiful things to find in film.
Awesome. Well, John, it's been fun. We've been wanting to connect for a while. I'm glad we finally got to chat.
Yes.
But hey, don't hang up on the call yet. I'm going to stop the recording and let's just chat for a couple seconds.
Sure.
All right, buddy. You take care.
This episode is sponsored by Gemini Crown Tech, owned and operated by Stephanie Moore and Stephanie Harrison. We at Gemini Crown Tech have covered all your production management needs with our proprietary software. Please visit our website at www.geminicrowntech.com and use the code FMP for Filmmaker Mixer podcast listeners, so we know how you heard about us.
Thank you for listening to the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, a podcast created and hosted by filmmakers Jeff Stolen and Andrew Lamping and produced by Melody Lopez.
Our theme song was composed by Stephen D. Bennett.
Make sure to follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us on, and stay tuned for future episodes.